everyone. Thank you for sticking around through a day that dove really deep into kind of all aspects of this debate. Jarrod, thank you so much
for
being here. You are the Deputy Assistant to the President and the Executive Director of the National Energy Dominance Council. Thank you for doing this.
You got to hit the dominance.
Hitting the dominance. It's not just the Energy Council, it's the Dominance Council. So that brings me to my first question. What is this?
No, great question. This is President's idea, and it's a great idea that he came up with as he was going on the campaign trail. I mean, obviously, two of the big issues that the president focused on during the campaign: immigration and unleashing American energy. And so when he won, and in the transition period of entering the White House, he specifically wanted a team based in the White House that could focus on all of the areas that we need to turn around to unleash American energy and to make America energy dominant. And the thing that I've realized, which he knew, and this is the reason why he set up the council, is it's spread out into so many different areas of the government bureaucracy. And so, you have the Department of Interior, but the Department of Interior has so much to do with energy and oil and gas leases and all that kind of stuff. You have the Department of Energy, which works with the Department of Interior, but they're more focused on a lot of the nuclear elements, and they have a lot of the loan programs. Then you have EPA, which is doing a lot of the regulations and the permitting. And so that's just three. And then you throw in, USDA and everything the State Department has to do. So his goal was to set up a council based in the White House that could really just cut through the bureaucracy so that we could work specifically with companies on what are your projects, how do you get them launched fast, and we could really be a one-stop shop for people to come. I mean, I look at it, we're very much a startup in the White House. I mean, it's a small group.
How many of you are there?
It's 10 of us. I mean, it's kind of a tiger team.
And are you having weekly meetings? Or are you on group chats? All of the above? What does a week in the council look like?
Well, it's very much like a startup style. I mean, we're all in a little suite in the EEOB, and so everybody's kind of in a bullpen talking to each other. So the way we built it is we recruited people from the different sectors that we knew we would want to focus on. So we've got a couple experts on oil and gas and pipeline creation. We've got a couple experts on mining and critical minerals. Same on just power generation and the grid and coal. And so
anything on solar or?
We do not have solar because the president's kind of priorities are around turning around fossil fuels. And so a lot of what happens is, we've been involved in a lot of the EOs that the president has done, but also kind of the day-to-day is more different companies coming in, whether it be a nuclear company or an oil and gas company, and saying, hey, we have a project, we need to get it off the ground. We think it's shovel ready in the next couple of years, but we have this issue with EPA and this issue with BLM over at Interior, and we can serve as a voice in the White House that can call over to these different departments and say, hey, this is a priority. This is something the White House wants to get done. This is something the president wants to get done. And what's the holdup over there? And that's.
So you're kind of the voice of the White House that is interfacing and kind of the fixer for all of these different agencies?
Yeah, as long as it's in line. I mean, obviously the president decides what the projects and the priorities are,
right,
and then we can help implement it. And it's really been shocking to me, and I think it would be shocking to anybody, of how much the bureaucracy can hold these things up. I mean, particularly in mining, we have a big critical minerals mining issue, and it takes decades to get some permitting done. And so it's the kind of stuff that's fairly common sense. If we're going to compete with China, we've got to get this stuff done. And so we like to be kind of a service that we can cut through some of that. And we've also done a lot of great work. I mean, obviously with the White House team on things like, you saw the president had a big sweeping coal executive order. Same, we did nuclear executive orders just a couple weeks ago. And so those have served as kind of the blueprint of like, here's the priorities, here's what we want to get done. And that's, that's a little the slice of the life of the last 100 days or so for us.
So President Trump has talked extensively about the U.S. facing an energy emergency. That's part of the reason he created this council. Yep. But we're also seeing record levels of production right now. So what is the emergency actually, and how dire is it? Yeah,
well, the emergency is that particularly our grid can be in danger because we don't produce enough electricity in the United States, just as an example. So what we get worried about on my team is, this is part ties back to the coal EO. If coal production starts to shut down, that is a big driver of a lot of energy sources. Or that's a big driver of electricity. If that shuts down, then people start to have rolling blackouts and brownouts. And obviously, when you get into the summer months, the last thing we want to see is people trying to put on their air conditioning, and you have blackouts and brownouts. That's kind of an immediate. The bigger issue, and this is one of the huge ones we're trying to tackle, is we're in a massive competition, particularly with China, on the AI race. And you've heard the last speaker, and you've probably heard a lot of speakers talk about that. So we are trying to literally generate artificial intelligence. That takes a ton of energy to do that. And if we want to win that race against China, we need power, we need electricity. And so we've met with a lot of the big tech companies. These are companies that are trying to build data centers. They're trying to work with different governors in different states of where to put these data centers. They have to be cool. They have to have cool, like the equipment has to be cooled, and so that takes energy. And
right,
so,
and how do you not pass on costs to consumers?
And this is exactly the big. This is kind of the big overarching issue that I think will be part of a legacy issue that the president will help solve. Is how do we build those data centers so that they're plugged into the grid, are being produced enough energy, and that it is not just handed off into the consumers. And so that is a big part of the kind of the meetings we have. We do with a lot of governors want to move these into their states. A lot of the utility companies are working with how to do it. Obviously, like the AI companies are coming in to talk with us too. And so this is an issue. I think everybody kind of tangentially knows it, and we talk on the high level like we're talking now, but like how do we actually set up a model and then scale that model?
Are you guys there yet, or are you in early
Well, we have
stages?
some early successes in various areas. Texas has been very good on the front end of showing how this can work. And so now it's, what are some of the lessons learned of some of the early successes that we can take and scale and multiply across the different.
So you mentioned China. One of the ways that China is dominating in the global energy race is they are investing heavily in renewable energy technology, in solar, in storage, and batteries. Do you worry that the U.S. is ceding that ground too much by over-indexing on oil and gas and not thinking about the future?
I don't. That is one of the problems with these intermittent sources is that, yes, a lot of the materials are coming from China. I think the issue that we've had here in the U.S. is so much of the last 4 years, we're focused on these, I call them intermittent sources, because you're not going to generate the power you need. The sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. And so what you need is reliable sources, particularly when we're talking about...
But there are solutions to that, like storage, like battery power.
Well, but not at the scale that you need to, particularly with the kind of energy we're demanding more energy now than ever before. And so the faster way to get to it is the priority projects of natural gas. That's the highest growing level right now. And we know that things like ultimately nuclear will be a perfect source. And that was a lot of what our EOs recently talked about is, right now the demand is there. These other ones you're talking about, those are incentivized by tax breaks, and they can't stand on their own feet. What can stand on its own feet are things like natural gas.
But don't you need to think about the future? I mean, Elon Musk, who the president and a lot of people around him have said was the smartest mind on the planet right now, thinks that this is the future, that you need to be thinking about renewable energy, that there is a way, if you invest, to make sure that we have the right storage and that you can use it to power the country.
Yeah, well, what I would say is the president is in charge, and the president thinks that
But do you think
nuclear,
Musk is wrong on this?
I think the president's right, which is nuclear. And I think he's made it very clear that, he wants to make that a priority of the long-term issue. But the president's a fan of fossil fuels. He thinks that they've got a bad deal. He believes in big, beautiful coal, as he calls it, clean coal. And he doesn't want coal plants to close. He also wants.
Well, haven't you heard from business leaders, though? I mean, we've had people up on this stage who have talked about, like, coal is so backwards looking. Like, it seems like we're past that, and you're investing in stuff that a lot of companies, when you talk about private sector, have moved on from.
There are companies that moved on from it. However, it's a very reliable source right now that gives you the power you need. And there are coal plants that are particularly keeping the grid going. And the last thing we want is, in the short term, to have any problems with the grid.
And well, I guess that's kind of the question I'm getting at, is the short term versus long term thinking. Shouldn't you be doing both? Like, can you walk and chew gum at the same time?
100%, and that's why I mean, we're putting a priority on some of the nuclear as the long term. Also, natural gas. I mean, that's another thing that again is the highest growing sector right now. And one of the problems we've faced, and what the president said, we've gotten away from building pipelines in this country, and it's a big issue, particularly in the northeast of the U.S. is, how do we get pipelines built to get the natural gas? I mean, it's crazy to think about. We've got a huge natural gas source in Pennsylvania. That natural gas can't even get its way over into New England and the Northeast states because we can't build a pipeline to get across to it. And so the president's put a priority on building infrastructure like that. That will be a long-term, low-cost, reliable source for a hugely populated area. And this isn't even a partisan thing. You've got Democrat representatives, governors in the New England states who want to help their residents. And so I actually think the tune is changing on, people are embracing natural gas and some of these other sources more than they ever have before. And so the meetings I'm having are less about, hey, you need to be investing in these in the intermittent renewables. It's more, how do we build more infrastructure to get the natural gas?
You can't do both, or you don't want to?
Well, it's about time and resources, and we feel like the natural gas, the amount of natural gas we have here in the U.S. that we can export, that is a huge benefit to us in the United States. I was just up in Alaska last week. It's one of the other big flagship projects that
I wanted to talk about that.
Well, you go up to Alaska, and it's amazing to be there because we talk about things like the National Petroleum Reserve and ANWR, but if you're not there and you don't see it and see the scale of it, I mean, you fly into Anchorage, and we had some meetings with a lot of the local industry leaders there. But then you have to get on another plane, and you fly 2.5, 3 hours up to the North Slope, and you see what the National Petroleum Reserve is, or you see Prudhoe Bay, which is the biggest oil and gas field in the U.S. And these are massive, barren lands of, it's snow and it's ice, and it's exactly where, if you just picked out a map and you'd say, well, where would we want to have the oil and gas come from. It's there. I mean, it's out there. It's
Yet, but you talked about the challenges of getting there, right? I think that's where there's been some skepticism from businesses and from some folks in the industry of, is it realistic at this point, the cost versus the reward of what you can get out of there?
100%, because what we viewed is there's an existing pipeline now that they built years and years, decades ago. They built it in 2 years, and for some reason, we've gone backwards in this. We want to build this pipeline. It's a twin. It would go right along the same stretch, and that would open up huge avenues for us to take this and export it over into Asia. I mean, right now, again, if you're talking about just looking on a map, these things that don't make sense, you're taking stuff through the Panama Canal, where this could come straight from Alaska over into Asia. It would be a huge benefit to the U.S. overall. And we had a lot of international folks there. We had a lot of the Alaskan community there. And again, you go up there, it's hard living up there. We met with the local residents who work there. They want it because they want infrastructure. There's no roads up there. They want schools and infrastructure and all the stuff that can come from people dedicating resources. And this is a huge, it's tapped, but it's not fully tapped. I mean, there's so much more we could do with this kind of resource that will benefit to all Americans, but also the people who live there want it because it would really change just the overall infrastructure in their area.
I just got a text message from one of my colleagues, Ben, with just a little bit of a news flash.
Yes.
Saying that the Energy Information Administration said today that U.S. oil production will decline in the next year, reversing a decade of nearly continuous growth. And the forecast is that oil companies have slowed their drilling amid the Trump administration's tariffs on steel and the trade wars clouding of economic activity. Are you concerned? Is the trade war making your job more difficult?
No, the trade war is not. I mean, the good part about the trade war is the president is getting better deals for the American people and getting better deals for the American worker. I do think part of that is exactly what I'm talking about. We have a huge asset that is helping us in these trade negotiations. We produce and can produce so much energy here. So the more we can produce energy here and export it, that will be a huge benefit to us in these trade negotiations. When you talk about trade negotiations in the EU, you're talking about trade negotiations in Asia. The energy, particularly like natural gas and oil that we can produce here and sell to our friends and allies will help us in these trade negotiations.
But what do you say to companies who come to you and they're like, hey, these tariffs are going to make us have to slow down production because of the rising costs?
We say to them, there are other innovative ways that we can improve production. I mean, it's a big part of what the President and Secretary Burgum and Secretary Wright talk about is there are ways to innovate. We want to get the costs down, but you can't just get the costs down without using new technologies. And this is where things like AI and people trying new innovative technologies can get the price of all these things down, and then will ultimately help us when we're trying to sell it to our friends and allies. And it ultimately will benefit the consumers here in the U.S. because we always have to be innovating. We also always have to be using new methods to improve our production here of energy.
When it comes to our allies, that's the other side of the trade war, is there's so much uncertainty. Do you worry that these tariffs could make allies think twice about relying on us for oil?
No, it doesn't concern me at all. I think the biggest concern I have is what we hear from companies and international partners over and over and over again. Hey, everything you're doing is on the right direction, but these are long projects, long lead time. If we're going to invest in oil production or pipelines or anything, we need this stuff like in legislation, codified, so that yes, it's fantastic everything the president is doing, but these are decade-long projects that we're talking about. And so while it's great now, we need to have the kind of de-risking language.
Yeah, and I want to get to reconciliation, but just quickly, for those that are concerned about the uncertainty, I think that's been the word that I've been hearing from businesses on all kinds of issues, but especially for big factors like oil and gas and global trade. In terms of our allies being able to rely on at least knowing what the climate is going to be in the coming years. Like, how do you give them more certainty about what they can expect from the U.S.?
Yeah, well, I think the certainty is there, and that's why I'm stressing on kind of the infrastructure and of our. I mean, a big part of the certainty of can we be exporting a lot of this. A lot of our energy is, do we have the infrastructure to do it? And a lot of that is in these pipelines. It's in building the export facilities. It's in the permitting. And if these things don't get done under President Trump, when we've got the ability to do that now, I worry that they're never going to get done. And so that's why we're trying to move as fast as possible so that we can build the export facilities and the transmission lines available so that we can start this. And once it's built, it's built. And so you can't really turn them off.
Well, actually, to that point, does the Trump administration plan on investing directly in oil and gas infrastructure like refineries or pipelines? Like, will the federal government pay for this stuff in part?
Well, one of the big problems is in the past the Department of Energy has a loan program office, and it had been used for a lot of these renewable projects in the past. We're changing the priority of that. So yes, we want to invest more in prioritized projects that are oil and gas related, nuclear related, and so a big part
put federal
of the shift.
money behind that.
Yeah, well, those are loan programs, but yes, I mean that the whole point is, if we're going to be giving out loans, we want those loans to be paid back. Obviously, it's going to be in projects like that.
And taking money away from renewables, you see as
yeah. Well, a lot of the renewable projects that they gave loans to in the past they didn't get paid back, and so we want to put it behind projects that are economically viable and are going to turn around and actually help us.
Let's talk about reconciliation.
Yeah.
The big, beautiful bill, the mega bill, Musk called it a disgraceful abomination, as it goes by many names. Are you happy with where it stands right now? What do you think needs to change?
Yeah, I was very happy with the House version. Was working late last night with Secretary Burgum and others on the Senate version. No, I mean, I think as far as energy projects goes, we're heading in the right direction. One of we touched on it a little bit, but it's the big issue that companies have is they want to plan long term, and you heard about it from the last panelist. Is if we want to commit, we want this stuff in legislation, we want it codified, and so we're trying to streamline a lot of the permitting process. We're trying to ultimately change some of the ways you can build pipelines, for example. The loan program office, prioritizing that more towards these oil and gas projects. And just overall, what we want is just, I use the term de-risking. It's we want to make sure people know that the legislation is there so that if they are willing to put their capital and risk it on big, bold energy projects, that it is in law and they have the backing to do that. And so there's a lot of kind of more minor levels of doing that, but that's kind of the big overall initiative that we're trying to get in the Senate.
Let's talk Greenland for 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think we should go to war with Greenland for their critical minerals?
I was more focused on Alaska than Greenland, but I'm not in the Greenland negotiations. I'm up for whatever the president wants to do on Greenland. But critical minerals is one of the good things that the president has focused on is we have not focused as much on critical minerals. China does unbelievable things in the bad way when it comes to critical minerals. They go out all throughout the world, outbid Western companies because they can to just buy mines, and they follow no rules or regulations as far as just tearing up the land and mining what they want. And then when we try to do something either in the U.S. to put capital or to try to build around our own critical mineral infrastructure, China then drops the price of everything, and so it doesn't even make economic sense for companies here to invest in it. And so China has been playing a lot of games when it comes to critical minerals. It's a thing that prior years we have not given it enough attention. It is a top priority of the president, and so he is 100% focused on getting us increased production and strategy when it comes around critical minerals.
And just because we've had a number of folks on this stage from oil and gas, from nuclear, from solar and wind, why doesn't the Trump administration see solar, wind, other renewables as energy sources? I mean, his executive orders on energy haven't even considered those as energy sources.
Yeah, well, because the sun doesn't shine all day, it goes down at night, so it's not.
We've heard that a lot, but there.
Well, that's why. I mean, it's
That's it?
The other ones are more reliable. Well, also, I mean, it's not it, because as you mentioned, a lot of the stuff that's coming in to support the wind and solar projects, those are sourced in China, and we want to have American-made things. And also, they are not economically viable. A lot of what their business model is based on getting handouts from the U.S. government, and we want to put it towards projects that are economically viable.
Well, like
and are
any new thing, it requires infrastructure, it requires investment for it to then,
Very focused on this is the new thing, but I've said we're focused on nuclear as kind of the long-term area there. The president has not focused on wind and solar, and they haven't proven that they can get off the ground. They're not that new. They've been around, and they haven't proven that they can get off the ground.
Why not have someone on your team, at least, that's familiar with the renewables who can explain to people why it's not the route that you guys are going?
Well, we do. I mean, I do think, we come in, there's a lot of energy companies, some of the, obviously the big ones, they've diversified, and they've put, oil and gas companies are also have invested in this in the past, and they come to us and they say, this is where we're going to focus now, because we know that we're going to be able to be profitable, and it's going to be reliable if we focus on more of the oil and gas element to ours, and less so on the renewable portion of it. And so we're hearing that from the industry. It matches what the president's priorities are, but it's also the same feedback we're getting from the industry.
Yeah, and I ask, because I was interviewing Senator Curtis earlier on the stage, who has been kind of like the climate Republican, and he's very much for an all of the above energy strategy, thinks we should be investing in 100% across the board. That just doesn't seem to be at all the Trump administration.
Well, we have to prioritize. It's about prioritize.
Yeah.
We have a certain amount of money, we have a certain amount of time, and what are you going to prioritize? In the past, in the last 4 years, they prioritized the other way. Well, president has a different opinion. He wants to prioritize over here, and there clearly had been a strong tact away from fossil fuels. The president wants to go more towards that direction, and that's where we want to put our resources. And again, as you that's what's going to help the American people, as long as we're able to build some of the infrastructure around it.
And lastly,
Yes.
You talked about some of what you guys have done in like the first 6 months or so you've been around. What are we going to see from the Energy Dominance Council in the next 6 months?
Yeah, well, we want to break ground on a lot of these projects. I talked about some of the pipeline projects, which would be game changers. We have mines that are going to be opening. We have some of these pipelines. We have a lot of big LNG facilities that are going to be opening, particularly in the Gulf of America. We've changed a lot of rules for the Gulf of America to make oil production even more there. We did something as simple as commingling that allows 100,000 more barrels a day to come out of the Gulf of America. So there's going to be a ton of new facilities and projects around all that that we're going to be announcing in the time.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for your time today. And our colleague Annie Allen is going to close it out for us. Thank you, guys.